Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode until the question-and-answer session. At that time, if you would like to ask a question, please press star 1 on your touch-tone phone. Today's call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I will like to now turn your call over to Ms. Razad. Ma'am, you may begin.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Yulia Razad, and I work for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families in the Office of Community Services. I have been leading LIHEAP site visits since 2012, and I'm here today to talk to you about what you can expect during one of our site visits. I'm noticing that not everyone who is on the phone has logged into the webinar portion. If you are having trouble, I want you to know that we are recording this webinar and we'll make the recording, which is, my presentation, along with the slides available through our website in a couple of days once we get all of that data. So no worries, you will be able to see the slides a little bit later, even if you can't get on right now. So I wanted to start with an explanation, a little bit of the philosophy behind our site visits. This is not an audit. We are not auditors, and we are not here to play gotcha or catch you at doing anything wrong. This is really a partnership, and our goal is to make sure that each grantee is operating the best possible LIHEAP program that they could possibly operate. And so when we go on these site visits, OCS is really here to listen, learn, and advise. We try very hard to get a full picture, an understanding of your LIHEAP program. It is as much of a learning opportunity for us as it may be for you. LIHEAP is a block grant, and each grantee creates a program that is specific to their needs and their communities. And so each state and each tribe's program is different from the other. And so this is really an opportunity for us to come and really do a deep dive and get a really great understanding of how LIHEAP works at your state or in your tribe. And we're also here to provide advice and to share what others are doing. Part of these site visits, we go every year and we learn what other states are doing. And when we go to one state, we'll share what we've heard from other grantees. And finally, our site visits are an opportunity to provide technical assistance. We're here to help you. We want you to come with questions for us. 50% of our efforts should be spent in the technical assistance arena at any site visit. We really want to be able to get to the ground level, be with you, and help you through any barriers or challenges that you're facing. And so we have several objectives when we go to any site visit. The first, as I was saying, is to get a really clear understanding of exactly how you are interpreting the requirements of the LIHEAP statute and how you are putting together your LIHEAP program. As you know, in LIHEAP, the grantee is the primary interpreter of the LIHEAP statute. So when we come and visit you, our goal is to get a very good understanding of your interpretation and the way your LIHEAP components are set up. We also want to formulate an assessment of your own monitoring efforts. Each grantee is, of course, responsible for monitoring the administration of LIHEAP in their state or in their tribe. So we want to get a clear picture of what you do and how you do it in terms of monitoring subgrantees or monitoring intake eligibility if you're not subgranting the program. We also want to understand and analyze your policies and procedures for preventing fraud, waste, and abuse in the program. It's program integrity is very important for LIHEAP, and when we come and visit you, we want to get a very clear sense of what your policies are and how you ensure integrity in LIHEAP. And finally, like I was saying earlier, we want to identify any technical assistance needs that you may have. Some technical assistance we will be able to provide on site, and as you will learn later in the presentation, we also offer additional technical assistance after our site visits to help you through any challenges or barriers that you may be facing. So there are 6 major steps in a LIHEAP site visit. I'm going to go through all 6 of these, kind of do an overview of what you can expect at every step. And then after that, I will take your questions. So grantee notification. Each year we publish an information memorandum that is published to our website and emailed to all of you that lists the grantees that we will be visiting for site visits in the current fiscal year. And after we publish that information memorandum, for those states and tribes that are on the list for the current year, people from our office may contact with you to try to confirm dates that you are available for our site visit. Our site visits normally last 4 to 5 days for a state and 2 to 3 days for a Native American tribe, depending on the size of the organization and the degree to which there is subgranting of funds or transfer of funds to other state agencies. So before you get anything from us in writing, we reach out to you informally to try to ascertain when's a good time to come. We certainly don't want to come when you have a really busy time of year, and we don't want to come when you're planning on going on vacation. We want to make sure you're available to participate with us, and we want to make sure that the timing is convenient for everybody. And so once we have that put together, we issue a formal notification letter that you receive by email and also gets mailed. And the notification letter is several pages long, but there are 3 items that you really need to pay attention to that in this notification letter. One, of course, is the dates of the actual site visit. So hopefully those would be the same as were negotiated during the informal conversations we were having. And if they're wrong, we really need to hear from you to tell us that we made a mistake. Another is the required documents that we will ask you to submit to us. It is an attachment to the letter. It's about 3 pages long, and it lists all of the things that we are asking from you. And then the third item is the due date by which we are asking that you submit these documents to us. These are the 3 main things that you need to look for in your notification letter when you get it. I'd say for those grantees that are on the list for this year's site visits, probably about half of you have received your notification letters, and the other half, they'll be coming soon. So when you get the letter and you start reading through it, we are, of course, are there to answer any questions. There'll be contact information for the site visit team leader in your letter, and that person is there to answer any questions you have about the information in the letter and the list of required documents that we're asking from you. And I'll get into that a little bit more in just a second. So after we send out the notification letter, someone from OCS will reach out to each grantee and ask them for their help in planning the logistics and the design of the agenda. And here we need to hear from you about your recommendations for subgrantees that you think it would be good for us to visit. We will, of course, take your recommendations into consideration. And any kind of discussion of travel restrictions or recommendations in terms of how long it takes to get from one place to another, any hotel recommendations you have, any kind of warnings about weather and how easy or difficult it is to get from one place to another by car or by plane. Depending on the size of your state, we may be traveling both by car and plane to get to subgrantees. So we really need your help. You know your state, you know the layout and the geography better than we do. From all of that information, we put together a draft agenda for the site visit, and we send it to you for your comments and your input. It's very important to us that you know exactly what's happening and when it's happening, and that you are able to make sure that everyone who needs to participate at particular times is available. So that is why we share the agenda in draft form before we finalize it, so that you can make sure if, on a certain day we're scheduled to talk to the finance team at the state level, that the finance folks plan to be there that day and no key personnel are on vacation or planning a day off for any reason. And we're flexible with the agenda. We want to work with you, and so if somebody can't make it one particular day, we're able to move things around to some extent, but we do need your help to make sure that the subgrantees we select are available on the days that we need to go see them, and that the executive director of each subgrantee and the LIHEAP director for each subgrantee are available to speak to us. And so once you've received the draft agenda and confirmed everyone's availability for us, then we finalize the agenda and we issue a final version to you. The next step is the document submission and review process. And so that notification letter that I referenced earlier has a list of documents that we're asking for you to collect and to submit to us. And the documents are broken up into 4 categories. The first are policy documents. These are any kinds of state laws, statewide or agency-wide directives or policies that impact LIHEAP. So, for example, we had one state where there was a state law that said that no federal or state money of any sort can be spent to do outreach for LIHEAP. Well, that's something we'd want to know about in advance. So that's an example of a policy document. Not necessarily a LIHEAP-specific policy and procedure manual, but laws and policies that are implemented at the legislative level or at the director level of your administration. The second type of documents that we're asking for are programmatic documents. These things include things like LIHEAP policies and procedures, your monitoring protocols, any reports that subgrantees submit to you, your contracts with utility vendors, any manuals you have, training materials, these kinds of things. And then the third type of documents that we're asking for is fiscal documentation. So in this section, we're asking for things like an accounting manual. We always ask for a copy of the general ledger for the year that we're reviewing for LIHEAP funds. And when we ask for the general ledger, we need it to be transaction specific, so that it lists transaction by transaction everything that was billed against your LIHEAP grant. And the reason we ask for that is that once our financial reviewer receives the general ledger, they go through it and select a number of transactions, and then send you those transactions and ask for you to compile the backup documentation for those transactions. So if the transaction selected was a payment to a subgrantee for a month's worth of work, then we would want to see the invoice, any report that was submitted along with the invoice, a copy of the check if you're paying someone by check, all of the backup documentation to support that transaction. If the transaction selected was a grantee level administrative cost, So say state employee salaries, we would be looking for timesheets that substantiate those costs. We are also looking for definitions for various policies that govern how you expend and obligate LIHEAP funds. So we'd like to know what your definition is of administrative costs, since the federal government doesn't set a definition for LIHEAP administrative costs and leaves that decision to each grantee. We'd like to know what your definition is for an obligation of funds and an expenditure of funds, as that should be reflective of reports that you submit to us. And then finally, the fourth type of document that we are asking for are subgrantee documents. And so when we send you that final agenda, we select normally 2 to 3 subgrantees to visit during the trip. And we ask for programmatic and fiscal documents for those subgrantees that were selected. There's a pretty long list of documents, but 2 that I want to point your attention to is, one, a copy of their general ledger. So just like we would request a copy of the general ledger from the grantee, we would also like a copy of the general ledger related to LIHEAP for the subgrantees that we are visiting, because we will also be selecting transactions from those general ledgers and ask the subgrantees to provide backup documentation for the selections that we've made. The second item I want to point your attention to is that we will need a list of clients served by those subgrantees in the fiscal year that we are reviewing, preferably in an Excel format. So the reason we ask for that, we don't actually need any personally identifiable information. If you track clients by case file number, really we can just need a list of all the case file numbers for that fiscal year. The reason we ask for that is that we use that document to then randomly select 60 case files for each subgrantee that we're visiting. So for them to be ready for us to review when we come on site to those subgrantees. So we will provide this list to you in advance, especially if the subgrantees archive their files and they're not readily available on site. This is actually information that we'd like to hear from you. If that's the case, that's definitely feedback we'd need to know. And again, we're not asking to get any personally identifiable information. We don't need their social security numbers. We don't need their addresses. We don't need their account numbers. We need whatever identifiable information you would need to pick that file out from all the other files if we were to select that file for review. So those are, in addition to those kinds of documents, we would also like to see things like training documents for eligibility workers, copies of audits, copies of monitoring reports for the subgrantees that we're visiting, copies of the subgrantees' manuals for operating LIHEAP, and if you are using LIHEAP funds for weatherization, we'd also like to have the same information for the weatherization program. So all of these documents, once you've collected them, will need to be submitted to us through a website called Basecamp. It is a file sharing website, and only you and our federal staff and our monitoring contractors will have access to these documents. This is how you will submit them to us. You basically upload them to this website. And the notification letter sets a deadline for the submission of these documents, and it's usually 40 to 60 days prior to the site visit. We review all of these documents in advance and in detail because we want to come to you knowing as much as possible about how you operate the program. So it is very important to us that we receive these documents within the deadline time period. There is, of course, a certain level of flexibility if, things don't go as planned, if your office gets flooded, if documents are lost or damaged, things like that. And I say office gets flooded because that's happened before. But it's very, very important that we have enough time before we come on site to review and understand the materials. Receiving them 2 or 3 days prior to the site visit is not sufficient, does not provide us enough time to read it all and digest it all and get a clear understanding of what we can expect when we come to visit you. We may even have to confer with you and email or call back and forth to clarify our understanding of some of these documents if we have questions prior to coming to the site visit. And so comes the actual site visit. Hopefully by now you've submitted all of your documents, you've notified all of the subgrantees that we plan to visit that we're coming and when we're coming and when to expect us and what files they should have ready for us to review. And the basic layout of the site visit is it starts with an entrance conference. It usually lasts 30 minutes to an hour where we lay out our objectives and our plans for the site visit and try to meet everybody. This is usually just with state-level staff. We do not ask that subgrantees are invited to the entrance conference. And so after that, in the first and second day, we have a series of conversations with the grantee, and we talk with programmatic staff, we talk with fiscal staff. If you transfer any of your funds to a second state agency to administer weatherization, we go and we visit their agency and talk to their programmatic and fiscal staff. And so sometimes this takes a day, sometimes it takes up to 2, depending on how many agencies we need to visit and everybody's availability. But we basically have a conversation where we talk to you about what your policies and procedures are and how you expect your subgrantees to administer the program. We talk to you about how you collect data to report to us the information you need to report when you submit the household report or the carryover report. We talk about what you do for your monitoring. We talk about what rules you follow for weatherization and what you expect to see at the subgrantee level for weatherization activities. We talk about what you do to review client files when you monitor your subgrantees and what you expect to see when you open a client file at any one of your subgrantees. We talk about if you receive leveraging funds, how you account for them. If you operate an Assurance 16 program, we talk about what you would expect a subgrantee to be doing with those funds and how that would look like on the ground. It may appear as though we are asking repeat questions, and so, because you've just submitted dozens and dozens of documents to us that would answer the questions that we're asking, and it sometimes feels like, why is OCS asking me this question? I sent them the manual, it's all in the manual. Well, part of what we're trying to do is compare what's written in the manual with your understanding and with your expectation to make sure that what the policies and procedures are in writing reflect the reality of what's happening from your perspective. So we do that for about 1.5 to 2 days. And then for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th days, we visit subgrantees, and we have similar conversations with subgrantees. And we ask them about how they run the program. We ask them how they determine eligibility. We ask them if they make vendor payments directly, how they deal with refunds, what they do in terms of vendor contracts. We ask them about their relationship with you, how timely their reimbursements are. And so what we're looking at is to compare your expectations that you had just given to us in days 1 and 2 with what they say that they're doing. And so trying to make sure that the way that you want the program to be operated at the state level is communicated effectively to the subgrantee level, and that they are doing, they are administering LIHEAP in a way that is congruent with what your expectations are. That's what we're trying to measure, the degree to which the subgrantees are following the policies, procedures, and guidance that you as the grantee provide to them. And so we visit with both, if you have subgrantees that do weatherization and others that just do utility assistance, we try to visit both types of subgrantees. When we make our selection of who to visit in terms of subgrantees, we take that into consideration. We want to make sure that we get a full picture of how LIHEAP operates in the state. We try to pick subgrantees based on geography so that if you have both rural and urban areas in your state, we understand that a LIHEAP program in an urban area is run differently than a LIHEAP program in a rural area, and we will want to pick subgrantees that are representative of both areas. And then finally, during our visits with subgrantees, we review client files. And we review the files, we review the eligibility determinations. We ask subgrantees to provide us copies of the income guidelines and the benefit matrices for the year that we are reviewing, and we try to arrive at the same answers that they arrive at in each client file. So we look at all of the income documentation and we calculate income and make sure that we get the same answer that the intake worker got, and we determine the benefit and try to make sure that we get the same benefit level that the intake worker determined. If any of this work is done through a database at either the state level or the subgrantee level, we try to make sure that we are able to compare what's in the client file with what's in the database. So if your subgrantees are using a database system to do intake eligibility processing and or benefit payments, we would ask to receive kind of viewer-only rights for the database when we are on site, so that when we review client files, we compare with what's on paper with what's in the system to make sure that there are no errors, that everything matches up. So after we've done that for 2 to 3 subgrantees, depending on time, we come back to the state and we have an exit conference. When we talk to the subgrantees, we do not have an entrance conference or an exit conference with them. This site visit is a site visit of the state or tribal grantee. It is not a compliance review of the subgrantee. So the subgrantee's performance is basically a reflection of the grantee's performance in providing procedures and instructions and guidance and monitoring. And so we do not share with the subgrantees any of our findings. We do not share the results of our case file review. We save all of that to share with you at the exit conference. The exit conference normally takes about an hour to an hour and a half, and during the exit conference, we review all of our preliminary recommendations. So our recommendations fall into 2 categories. One are required actions and others are recommended actions. And required actions are things that we have found that we will require you to address. Recommended actions are things that we found that we recommend you address but cannot require you to do so. And this exit conference is always of a preliminary list of recommendations. Often we have not completed all of our work until we get back to DC and kind of have a debrief among all the people who came to the site visit. There's usually 3 to 4 of us that go on every site visit, and so we need to have a debrief. We need to make sure that the fiscal reviewer has had time to go through all of the backup for all of the transactions in the general ledger, make sure we have all the information we need. So sometimes additional recommendations or required actions are added after we come back to DC, and sometimes we decide that something that we brought up during the exit conference really isn't an issue, that we got further clarification and it was satisfactorily addressed. So, but to the degree possible, we want to help you through these recommendations. We want to make sure you understand where we're coming from when we make each recommendation, and we want to make sure that you have actionable information, that when we leave, you have a good idea of where you need to be headed to make corrections or revisions as necessary. So I talked a little bit about this, and so we see the site visit as combining kind of three perspectives into one full circle of understanding of LIHEAP. So we're comparing information that we read during the document review process, and we're reading all of your policies and procedures. We're trying to understand all of your expectations for how the program should be operated. And we compare that with our conversations with you to make sure that, you know, what you're listing in your procedures is actually what your understanding is. And then we compare that information with the understanding of the program at the sub-grantee level. And hopefully that creates kind of a full picture for us of how LIHEAP should operate, that the procedures and policies and manuals at the state level conform with, you know, your understanding of how the program operates, and is communicated down to sub-grantees in such a way that they understand it and that they are performing in the manner that is reflective of both your expectations and what's written in your policy manual. And so we really try to get as full a picture as possible of how LIHEAP works in your particular state or in your tribe. It's very important for us to understand the nuances and to understand the details, and so we may have to follow up with you to get further clarification, get additional documentation. Sometimes we'll follow up with you to find out more about things that you're doing really well. At the end of every fiscal year, we try to issue an information memorandum that outlines best practices and that we have learned and gleaned from these site visits. So if you're doing something exceptionally well that we feel is noteworthy and worth sharing with the rest of the country, we can also follow up with you to get more details on that so that we can share what you're doing with everybody else. Sometimes it really feels like, you know, you're operating LIHEAP in a vacuum. You know, you're doing what you're doing in your state, and you've been doing it for X many years. And especially if you don't have the opportunity to come to national meetings or national trainings, it sometimes is difficult to get perspective outside of your state. And so this information memorandum that circulates best practices, as well as the entire process for the site visit, is geared toward sharing with you as much as possible what other people are doing, how others approach similar problems that you may be facing, and to share, you know, your solutions to challenges with the rest of the grantees in our network. So the final report. This final report will be issued to you, and it will outline issues that we are requiring you to address and issues that we recommend that you address. Two things about the final report. We currently have a bit of a backlog in issuing these reports, and so you may not see your report for, you know, 12, 14 months after your site visit. So one of the reasons we spend so much time at the exit interview is that we don't want you to necessarily have to wait to start making changes until you receive the report, because it may be quite a while before you are able to read it. And so we would like you to, as much as possible, start making changes where you can more quickly than that. And so we spend all this time during the exit conference reviewing our preliminary findings and explaining them to you and providing technical assistance where we can and different approaches to solutions, because we know it might be a little while before you see this report. We're trying to improve, and we know that it is not the best possible outcome to have to wait more than a year to see a report. But in the meantime, we want you to be able to act without necessarily having it written down on paper. The other aspect of our report is that we want it to be a tool for you as much as it is a tool for us. So if you need, if you have things that you would like to see addressed in a report, the things that you are concerned about that you feel would be helpful if you had a report from the federal office stating that we recommend one action or another, we're here to help you. We want to make these reports useful for you, not just, you know, a listing of all of your flaws. We, as much as possible, try to point out best practices in our reports, and we want you to be able to use them to make substantive change in your LIHEAP program. So to the extent to which we can help you make changes that you'd like to make, we're here to help do that and facilitate that. The final step in the site visit process is the technical assistance and corrective action process. So like I said, we do try to provide technical assistance on site while we are with you at the site visit. But after that, we will also are able to provide technical assistance through our contractors to help you resolve some of the issues that arise as part of the site visit. Sometimes we wait to issue the final report before we send out technical assistance advisors, but that doesn't always have to be the case. If you feel you'd benefit from technical assistance advisors without having the report in hand, we're happy to send them out in advance with just a summary of the kinds of things that we talked about in our exit conference. And when we do issue the final report, the report specifies our requests for corrective action plans and the timeline with which we expect to receive those corrective action plans. Usually it's within 30 days of the receipt of the report, although the date has been a bit more flexible depending on how long it's taken us to get you the report in the first place. We recognize that if it's been 12 months since we were there on a site visit, it may take you more than 30 days to kind of try to remember everything that happened and to formulate a response. But ideally, we ask for these corrective action plans within 30 days of the receipt of our final report. We then evaluate the plans that you submit to us for each issue in the final report. And once we feel that an issue has been addressed satisfactorily, we issue a closure letter that basically states that all issues from this site visit report have been addressed to our satisfaction, and we feel that the site visit is officially closed. Again, in this whole process, we have the ability to provide you with technical assistance. We can send somebody on site to you for several days to help you think through solutions, to help you walk through possible challenges, to provide assistance in formulating new procedures or reworking the procedures that you already have. We really want you to feel like we are there to help you. We don't want you to feel like we just sent you the report and left you in the lurch to kind of figure out what to do from there. It's very important to us that you feel supported during this entire process and that you have a clear understanding of what you need to do to move forward. So if you haven't seen this yet, this is the schedule for all of the grantees that we are visiting this year. You can see next week we are going to both Kentucky and the Navajo Nation. In March we're going to Oregon and to Florida, actually the same week, and so on and so forth through basically the end of August. We're out and about. So looking forward to visiting you if you are on the list for this year. And so now I'm going to open up the floor to questions, which will be facilitated by our operator.
Thank you. At this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press *1 on your touch-tone phone. Please record your first and last name clearly when prompted. Your name is required in order to introduce your question. If you would like to withdraw your question at any time, please press *2. One moment for our first question. Our first question comes from Linda Walker. Your line is now open.
Hi. Actually, what I was asking was right at the beginning for the webinar code so that I could get into the website. But I do have a question. You didn't indicate what year you would be monitoring.
You're right. I'm sorry. I missed that. So we monitor 2 years back. So we are currently in federal fiscal year 2014, and this year we are reviewing federal fiscal year 2012 LIHEAP. The reason we do that is that we want to pick a year where all of the auditing that you undergo through the Single Audit Act has been done and completed, and an audit has been issued. So right now, the most recent year that has been audited and audits have been completed is this federal fiscal year 2012. So next year we'll be doing federal fiscal year 2013, and that is also spelled out in the formal notification letter that you receive.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we have no additional questions in queue.
Was that perfect? No one has any more questions? Okay, well, my contact information is up on the screen, so if you have questions that come to you later, or if you want to ask the question in a more private setting, please feel free to email or call me. I am available to assist you in any way that I can. Thank you.
Thank you. This will conclude today's conference call. All participants may disconnect at this time.